going, everyone? We are here for salary exploitation for week 3. I am your host, Russell Clay, and we are here with Jason. He's going to break down the week 3 slate for us, which is a little different. We got a London game this week. Rough week 2. I don't really know what to say other than that. Tight ends are dying. Passing touchdowns are at, a decade low. A lot of good defensive play in week 2. What do you have to say about week 2 before we head on to week 3?
This is obviously we're dealing with like small 2017 sample sizes, and we're trying not to overreact, but I think a lot of us are starting to overreact, and I'm certainly am. I texted you yesterday and was like, I'm done with Seattle. Like, I don't care. I'd rather lose to them than keep using them. Like, that offensive line is just making everything so inefficient, and I don't know, a team against San Francisco, I mean, at home, I think San Francisco's defense has actually improved from last few years, but overall, like, I'm starting to kind of narrow these teams out and just being like, okay, this guy's done. He's 35. He can't play anymore. This team, their offensive line's bad. I'm done with them. I'm narrowing it down.
I think after week 2, we can start to at least make some predictions on if these teams are showing real signs or not. Obviously, we have a lot of track record on a lot of these offenses, but certainly there's things like the Seattle offensive line, Jimmy Graham being utilized more so as a blocker and sort of directly near the line of scrimmage rather than a passing tight end. I mean, that's something you can't use him anymore. He's also dealing with an injury. You can't use him anymore until we see something. Like, he'll have to burn, he'll have to be a top 5 tight end a few weeks before I start to think about using him again. You mentioned, Seattle in general. I love Russell Wilson, but yeah, I don't think it's happening right now, especially from a fantasy perspective. So also Carlos Hyde in play. This proved a lot to me this week, I think. I think we can sort of not be afraid to play him anymore if he can do that against Seattle. So anyway, on to week 3. Quarterbacks. We have a few interesting players here. You mentioned Matthew Stafford at home against Atlanta, so a dome should be a fun game. Relatively cheap across FanDuel and DraftKings, obviously a little more expensive on Yahoo. What are you looking at in that game?
I mean, Stafford, obviously, we're talking before the Monday night game tonight, so we don't know what his Giants outcome is going to be. Face a tough defense at home against Arizona, facing another one tonight. Curious to see how he does. But, I mean, phenomenal week 1. He threw the ball 41 times. Detroit's always going to be a team that throws the ball. I mean, last year they ranked 3rd in passing play percentage at 64%. Like, he's going to go out there and chuck the ball 35-plus times. Being under 8K on FanDuel, I mean, 7,900, 62 on DraftKings. I mean, I just feel like those are relatively nice prices for a game where they're going to have to put up points because Atlanta will too. So, I mean, I think this is going to be one of the higher scoring games of the week. Wouldn't be surprising if it was the highest scoring because there's just a lot of crap games this week. But Stafford, those prices are just too cheap. And like you mentioned, I mean, 36 on Yahoo. We'll talk about Roethlisberger next. Like, we didn't get the discount on Yahoo that we did on the other 2 sites.
Stafford has looked really good the last 2 years, and he kind of got this reputation for being an erratic, sort of interception throwing, not efficient quarterback when he had Calvin Johnson. But since then, they've changed their offense considerably, and he's like a high efficiency passer now, and he uses Theo Riddick perfectly. Golden Tate has been a tremendous receiving option the last few years, and if Kenny Golladay can be a decent third option in the passing game this year, Stafford's going to have a lot of big games because that's a lot of guys to take into account. They also have Ebron running under the middle. Marvin Jones is a good player. They have no elite options. But either naked Stafford in those 2 sites. I'm not loving him on Yahoo. Again, I think you could just go with a bunch of the other guys in that range. But a lot of his receiving weapons as well are interesting. I like that call. Ben Roethlisberger at Chicago. Chicago's defense is okay. They've actually been pretty good through 2 weeks, and they were okay last year. But this offense is going to continue to put them in bad spots. And even on the road, I'm with you on Roethlisberger. What are you looking at for those prices?
Yeah, I mean, same as Stafford here. Like we get 6,200 on DK. I like Stafford just a little bit more, I think, at the sim price tags. I just kind of narrowly edging him out because I could also see Bell kind of doing his usual thing and getting 30 touches this week and like kind of limiting Roethlisberger a little bit. But we're going to get one of those games where like Roethlisberger pops off for 250 and 4 touchdowns. Like it's going to come soon. And I don't even think it's going to happen where it's going to be a home game either. I think it could be this week because like you said, I mean, this offense is just they're so bad. Like they're going to put these guys inside their own 50, and Roethlisberger's going to take advantage of that. And the Steelers haven't looked good. They haven't really been clicking. I mean, Minnesota was obviously a tough matchup against the Browns on the road. They didn't look great, but I'm going to chalk that one up to just Cleveland's defense actually really overplaying that one. They look good, but I don't know here. I mean, I like them. Once again, I mean, you're going to have the options, and his numbers throughout the first 2 weeks have been pretty identical. I mean, throwing 35 and 36 times, he's been around 250 yards and 2 touchdowns. Now he's at price tags where I think that's acceptable. Like when he was like 8,800 or 7,200 on DraftKings, you're not thrilled with those numbers, but I think right there that's actually a nice spot, and I think that's honestly I think that's his floor this week.
I really love that we got to see Martavis Bryant make some big plays. That gives me confidence moving forward that he's back. I know people were a little down on him after week 1, but a really positive indicator that he got, that touchdown and another big play there. So I really love that. Le'Veon Bell finally got the discount. Okay. And that's what I was kind of looking for after week 1, and we didn't get it whatsoever. But it's kind of looking like we're going to get more of a discount. So that's something I'm a little more excited about this week. I'm probably going to be more on him than Roethlisberger, but yeah, I think you can go with Roethlisberger, Brown. Bell 8,800 on DK, not something you necessarily want to run into. I'm more looking at 8,700 on FanDuel.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, Roethlisberger, definitely an interesting guy. And I'd want to play AB if you're playing Roethlisberger this week. You mentioned the min price maven Deshaun Kaiser. Sell me on this one because I understand Indy's D is bad. Sell me on it. What do you got?
So this is a week. I mean, obviously Brady's playing at home against Houston. Their defense took a little bit of a hit with injuries last week. You got Roethlisberger, Stafford, Ryan, Rodgers at home. Is there anyone, I mean, let me ask you the question. Is there anyone that you feel like is a must play compared to last week that we just felt like plug and play Brady, plug and play Rodgers? Is there anyone that fits that bar this week for you? Early on.
Derek Carr versus Washington, I really like. I think Brady's a must play every week. Again, that bit me in week 1. I'm playing Brady pretty much. I'm getting exposure to the Patriots offense every week, even against good defenses. I just think they're utterly dominant. If you watched the first half of that Saints game, or I should say the first quarter, if they kept going, they could have scored 60 points. And that Rex Burkhead touchdown just displays the versatility of this offense. They can score at will. I'm not worried about Houston. Their offense is going to continue to play that, make them be in bad spots. So I think he's a must play if you can get him in. But yeah, other than that, I mean, yeah, we're pretty much, yeah, I'm with you, but I don't know.
I mean, when you look at Kaiser was somewhat impressive in that Pittsburgh start. I mean, completed 67% of the passes, 222 yards, a passing touchdown and a rushing touchdown. Going into week 2 on the road against Baltimore, there was just no way he was going to do anything. Like it was important that he wasn't going to have a good game. That Baltimore defense is too good at home. I know he dealt with a migraine and left for some of it, but I mean, this is obviously a decent price tag for him. And like you said, I mean, there's some other passing attacks, and if you want to get exposure to him, like you can pay up for a lot of other positions and just pay down for Kaiser and hope he gets like a decent amount, like 6 points from his rushing yards or a touchdown. You kind of hope that he goes out there and throws 200 yards with a touchdown or 2. Like 5K on DraftKings, I mean, I don't mind going back to that cheap quarterback strategy this week. It's kind of tough because Stafford and Roethlisberger are priced so nicely, but $20 on Yahoo. Like I kind of don't mind him there for that price. And I mean, he's priced below some of the defenses this week. Like that's how low he is. And this Indy defense is just not good. I mean, Goff played really well against them in week 1. Carson Palmer, I just don't think he has it anymore, but obviously he led them back to a comeback victory. He's just intriguing for a bare min play. Like if you're building multiple lineups, I think you have to make a couple with him and just, toss in maybe a Rashard Higgins, who we'll talk about in a little bit with him, and then kind of go and just pay up for a ton of other spots.
Fair enough. I mean, I get it, especially on this type of week where it's kind of ugly all around. You can definitely throw him in there at the min. I'm not going to knock that. I've been the guy throwing in Goff the last 2 weeks, so I'm not going to knock anyone for doing that. Let's go to running backs. Dalvin Cook against Tampa. I'm kind of afraid of the post-Sam Bradford Vikings offense here. I love Dalvin Cook. I'm really upset he didn't get that touchdown. How are you going to overturn that? But, they're going to game plan better. They didn't really have a full week, I don't think, to plan this out. It's going to be a better game plan. I'm a little afraid of this Tampa run D, though. So what are you looking at there?
It's definitely a good defense. Like it's not bad. And I mean, I just think this week, it's better for Dalvin Cook in terms of a game script standpoint because Pittsburgh was always going to be out ahead, like especially when Case Keenum was going to announce the starter. Like it was just a bad spot. But I mean, if you look, Cook was really efficient. 64 yards on 12 carries. Like you said, he missed out on that touchdown, overturned, and then a fullback punched it in the play after. Like it was just a bad swing of events for Cook right there. Mm-hmm. Has had 8 targets through 2 weeks. I know Jerick McKinnon's still going to get some looks in the passing game, but I just think 6,500 for basically on FanDuel for Dalvin Cook, who's the workhorse back. And I just think it's going to be a better game for this week because Minnesota's obviously a better defense, and especially at home. I think they can manage, Tampa Bay's offense obviously better than they can Pittsburgh. And like you said, Tampa Bay is a top half defense. They did still allow, 4.4 yards per attempt last year, 117 rushing yards per game. So, if they can go like the Leonard Fournette approach and just give Cook the ball 25 times and then play really good defense, how are you not going to take that at 65 or 59 on DK?
Fair enough. Let's move to Theo Riddick here, which you mentioned, you have to love pass catching backs against Atlanta. That's just an easy play. We looked at Ty Montgomery. They just didn't cover him when he got out there. That's pretty clear. Unfortunately, for like the first time in, maybe 3 years, Theo Riddick not going to be under-owned. He's going to have that ownership, I think, after what Montgomery did. And Cohen. So hear me out. I think Theo Riddick is a great play, and he's the chalk, and you should play him. I think that's a great play. Is Amir Abdullah kind of a sneaky way to get around that exposure? That's kind of where I'm going to be looking to get tournaments, tournament carries and touches against that Atlanta, Abdullah is kind of a very good receiving down back. And I think, he usually gets 3 to 4 targets a game. He's the type of dude that can get those 30, 40-yard receptions on those plays that, he gets some space. So Riddick is a great play, not knocking that. But I do think Abdullah is kind of the sneaky leverage play there that isn't going to get the ownership, and he'll get more touches,
Yeah, I agree. Riddick doesn't get any work inside the run game whatsoever. He's going to be a guy who 5 to 7 targets a week. That's just what you're going to get out of him. You hope he catches 5 or 6 for 50, 60. Hope he gets a touchdown for the upside. Yeah, I definitely agree. Abdullah is he's always going to be that contrarian option because one, we didn't see it in week 1. I don't think we're going to see it tonight against the Giants. So it's going to be 2 down weeks for him where, like you said, the only real, if you played college football DFS, like that's your only way that Abdullah was a good pass catching back because we haven't seen it at all in the NFL. One, he's been injured. One, Riddick has been there. So it would be interesting. I'm not going to knock it. I don't know if he's going to find any way into my lineups just because
I would have such a better play.
I would have to be making a ton. And like there's Dalvin Cook, there's a couple other cheap running backs, and obviously we have
Yeah.
Bell and Ajayi, where I think you do have to have one of them in your lineup this week.
I think you got to go heavy on Bell again. And I was not a fan of Bell the first 2 weeks just because we didn't know. Even if he's bad, I think he's in such a great spot. He's such a
31
huge.
touches last week. Yeah,
Yeah. It's back to last year, so don't let the first 2 weeks scare you away. I think that's clear. Samaje Perine against Oakland, and for those of you who barely know who Samaje Perine is, that's how you say it. It's not Samaj Perine, like I pronounced it for 2 years while I watched him in college. So against Oakland, good, some good pieces on that Oakland D. They've played well. Obviously, they have Khalil Mack, but I kind of like where you're going here. Kind of a sneaky, not sneaky, but under-owned, a really productive college player. He has a really nice resume. And getting his I think Rob Kelly's going to be out. So if he does get that full workload, I mean, this dude had a 400 rushing yard game in college. He can carry the load. If anything, you can't knock him. He can definitely get 25 touches and pound it, get that maybe 100-yard rushing bonus. So what are you looking at there?
Yeah, Perine, I mean, 22 touches, obviously, in week 2 against the Rams after Kelly went out. He didn't break his ribs. That's the latest news, but they are bruised. They're expecting him to miss at least a week. Obviously, when you look at last week against the Rams, Chris Thompson was the one who had all the fantasy points. He had that 64-yard long rush, 229 rushing yards against this Los Angeles defense on the road. That was one of the biggest shockers, I think, for this week, especially from all three of these guys. I just was not expecting that. And I don't know how much Aaron Donald actually played, but I was just figured with him back, I mean, that's just another reason for not really taking running backs against him. But Perine, I mean, if he sees 20-plus carries, I'm all for it. I think, obviously, workload here this week is going to be kind of game flow dependent because Chris Thompson does work well in the passing game. Like, he's still going to be out there getting some passing looks. And if, say, you mentioned you like Derek Carr, if Oakland does jump out to a pretty big lead, say they do get up by 2 scores, I think it puts Perine in a little bit of a hole and he doesn't get that spot. Let's also not forget, if he fumbles once, I would not be completely surprised if they just said, Chris Thompson, here you go. Like, they've already established that they're not messing around. And that's the one thing I do worry about. It's not going to be like Kareem Hunt where, he fumbles first play and then he goes off for 200 yards and 2 touchdowns. Like, it's just not – I don't see that happening.
Fair enough. All right, let's get into the most interesting matchup of week 3, at least from a fantasy perspective. Wide receivers, we're talking about AJ Green in Green Bay. 2 weeks of Andy Dalton being putrid against what I would consider really, really, really good defenses. So this is really tough to figure out how much exposure you're going to get to the Bengals, including Dalton, Tyler Eifert, and AJ Green. I mean, I think you kind of evaluate them as a group. You know what I mean? Like, are you getting exposure to them or are you totally fading? We know the Packers defense looks great at home. Obviously, they're going to look better than what they looked like against the potent Falcons offense. So what are you doing this week? Because that's the big question of the week for me. How much exposure to Bengals am I going to get?
I feel like I have the blinders on and I'm looking right at AJ Green's price. I'm just like, oh my God, I'm probably going to click in a lot of them and probably more than I should, like here early on. But 8,100 on DK, that's not really a big discount. It's the 7,500 on FanDuel that I'm really excited about. And I just feel like, dude, it's just 18 targets over the first 2 weeks. He's only caught 10 of them. He was absolutely blanketed in that first one against Baltimore. I don't know what happened, honestly, in that Thursday night game just because they just didn't throw to him in the second half. But, I mean, AJ Green, I mean, a top 5 wide receiver in this league. I mean, top 3 if you want to talk, and put Julio Jones and Brown and Green in one spot. I know OBJ is right there, but I love AJ Green. It's going to be hard for me to avoid. I think it's easier fade on DraftKings, 75 on FanDuel, even 28 on Yahoo. I'm excited. I know it's on the road against Green Bay. I know, but their secondary is just not good.
There's a few guys like where their careers just go exactly how you wanted them to. And every time, if I want to cheer myself up, I just go to AJ Green's Pro Football Reference page and I just look at it and then I go to the seasons. And it just brings a smile to my face. He's just so good. And he hasn't had a perfect situation. He never really gets hurt other than last year. He just has humongous games when you want him to. He's just such a great guy. I just love that guy. Packers secondary is not good.
No.
Like, it's not good still. Dalton has had 2 horrific games. It's going to be low ownership, I think, unless people, it depends on, essentially now it depends on what the touts and the optimizers are spitting out for those sites. But hopefully, the projections are not good in the Bengals' favor and the Packers are big favorites. Because if we're getting, 7% ownership on Dalton and like 10 to 12% on Green, I mean, I'm thinking I'm going to go all in. I'm really glad they were Thursday night last week because I would have lost a lot of money. Anyway, I think Green's a legitimate play, and I think you do too. I don't know about the rest of the Bengals for you, but that's where I'm at. Higgins. So Rashard Hollywood Higgins. I was a big fan in college. I fell hook, line, and sinker for his production, and then he fell to the 5th round of the NFL draft, and then he kind of disappeared, and then Corey Coleman breaks his hand mid-game, and they had just signed him to the practice squad, and he goes off. What are you doing? What are you doing with him? How much he is the play, like he's a great value play. How much exposure are you going to get to him?
Probably a fair amount, I think, as a wide receiver 3. I just, like you said, getting Bell, getting Ajayi, getting Green, getting those high price guys in here. You're going to kind of need it. It's not like last week where you paid down at running back and could fit whatever wide receiver you want in. I think you're a little bit more exposed to taking one of these cheap guys. And I think Higgins is that. 76% of the snaps in week 2. Cleveland's made it clear that they don't care about Kenny Britt's contract that he signed. He's just not a guy that they want on the field right now or even be of use. 11 targets, 7 for 95. Colts secondary that's still missing Vontae Davis. I mean, I just think this game, it's so ugly, but it's actually going to be somewhat favorable for fantasy. Like, it really is.
Absolutely. And Hilton versus Cleveland. Brissett, not bad. Not bad. Exactly what I was looking for.
He's not Scott Tolzien.
He's not terrible. He is an NFL quarterback. He can do stuff. Like, he can do stuff. He's got NFL things he can do. Obviously, you're kind of looking more at Jack Doyle for the check downs. It's kind of, you haven't mentioned here in tight ends. Hilton and Moncrief. I don't love Moncrief. Probably won't play him, but you can play Hilton for sure. What's your take on that game?
Yeah, you can definitely play Hilton. And I know it looked like Moncrief was kind of the go-to guy, but I think that was just because Patrick Peterson was on Hilton, and you're just not going to throw Patrick Peterson's way. So you look at Hilton, I mean, bottled up, obviously, in week 2. Week 1, he was just a product of an absolute offensive disaster. This dude was a top 5 fantasy scoring wide receiver last season, obviously with Andrew Luck, but Cleveland torched Antonio Brown. Obviously, Baltimore ran the ball 32 times. They weren't going to really throw. 5,200 on DK, 67 on FanDuel, 22 on Yahoo. I mean, the prices continuously drop from week 1 to week 2, now to week 3. I still don't think people are going to play him. Like, he's going to be that contrarian option this week that's sub 10%. And I just like him a ton here because, one, he is that tournament play, and I think there is legitimate upside with him. And I think, like you said, I mean, Brissett is much more serviceable. I can see this kind of being like, a 27-24, 27-21 game. Like, I still think there's going to be some points here, and there's options for these guys. And I hate the running attacks for both these squads.
Absolutely. Tight ends, we already talked about Doyle. Eric Ebron against the Falcons. If you watch that Packers game, it was very clear early on that the Packers viewed the tight end position as a weakness in the Falcons' defense. And there were so many Martellus Bennett targets early in that game, and it just didn't get rolling. But I like where your head's at here. I think Ebron's an interesting guy if Stafford and the Lions are sort of in the same line of thinking, which, I mean, they should be. Based on what we've seen. So Kind of an interesting play on all sites. I mean, $13 on Yahoo, 3,300 on DK. I will say, Fleener has been paying off because he's been scoring touchdowns. He's just not getting the snaps I want him to. You know what I mean? He's just not in on enough snaps for me to feel confident in him every week. So I like Eric Ebron. Do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, because I mean, they're very similar in price to Jack Doyle, and I think Jack Doyle's going to be one of the chalkier tight ends this week because Browns, I mean, allowed most fantasy points to tight ends last year, allowed 13 touchdowns. Doyle caught all 8 of his targets in week 2. We saw Benjamin Watson go off against his Cleveland defense. Like, there's just a lot of recency bias and a lot that happened in week 2 that just has played Doyle here at these prices. So I think Ebron is that pivot, and I'm curious to see in about 5 minutes, what Ebron is tonight and like see what he does, because if he does have a big game, I mean, the Giants weren't great against tight ends. Like it might push a little bit more ownership to Ebron than I would like, but I think Ebron's a really good pivot and expected shootout.
You're exactly right. And I think we had this discussion a few times last year where I'm just rooting against someone so bad because I want to play him the next week at lower ownership. So I'm hoping he gets 2 targets again this week and just does nothing. And then, we get to play him at 5% next week at a super cheap price. So yeah, let's do it. Defenses here. Panthers and Steelers. Panthers against New Orleans. The Panthers offense looks kind of terrible, but their defense, Luke Kuechly's back. They're looking good. So what are you looking at against the Saints at home?
So, I mean, DraftKings 2,645 on FanDuel. Obviously, it's a little bit easier to just plug and play top defenses on FanDuel. Carolina, I mean, 10 and 15 fantasy points throughout the first 2 weeks, obviously playing San Francisco and Buffalo hells, but still no Willie Snead. I really do think New Orleans misses Brandon Cooks. Like, that offense just does not look the same. It's basically Will Lutz and log out. Like, right now, like, it's so bad. And I just don't think they're going to be able to get anything going. Carolina's a team that's just going to run the ball and keep, basically the ball out of Drew Brees' hands. Like, as long as they don't turn the ball over, which I don't think they will because Newton's really not throwing all that much, Carolina's a sneaky good defense. Like, even if they got 8 FanDuel points or DK points, like, I'm fine with that at 2,600 to 45 because there's no Baltimore. There is Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh is the top pay-up option for me this week against Chicago.
Yeah, I'm with you. Pittsburgh, they've run into quite a few good matchups for their defense early on, and they get another good one here. Their running game basically averaged 1.7 yards per carry last week. I'm talking about the Bears. They just have no passing options left. Cam Meredith and Kevin White were going to be not good, but at least below average, and now they're just working with non-NFL receivers. At this point, I like Kendall Wright, but Deontay Thompson, Josh Bellamy, all these guys are just not starting caliber wide receivers, and they're just going to get eaten up most weeks, especially against good secondaries, because all you have to do is play man and blitz, and what option do the Bears have? So it's tough sledding for them. I'm with you on that. That's going to be the chalk, especially on FanDuel at 5K. I mean, I'm fine with paying 5K for them. I guess, these are just great plays. There's really no way around it. They're going to get a ton of ownership, and you just got to eat that chalk at defense this year. I think that's the play, right? Even if it's high ownership. I mean, we've seen it the first 2 weeks. These offenses are just inept.
Yeah, you and I were talking. It was just, if you don't have the correct defenses, you're kind of losing. Like, there's so many chalk plays out there. Like, you're not gaining an edge there. Like, you have to. If you miss out by like 6 to 8 points, it could really make the difference between cashing and not cashing on your defense. It's insane this year.
Absolutely. So, again, we went through this. I don't think there are a ton of exciting value plays this year. For some reason, this is very different than previous years where studs emerge in the first few weeks. And honestly, that happens every year. And so far, the only guy that's really emerged is Tariq Cohen. And that's because he's getting like receptions and averaging 1 yard per carry. There's really no surprises so far this year. Kareem Hunt, kind of a surprise, but not really. He was a third round redraft pick by the end of the year. So it's kind of, you just go with the guys who have been good. AJ Green, Le'Veon Bell, you mentioned some of the guys, Jack Doyle and Hilton. And that's just kind of how we play it for salary exploitation this week.
Yeah, I mean, you and I talked, obviously, like we were kind of narrowing off like guys that we're not going to be on anymore, and obviously AJ Green. I mean, two bad games. That offense is two bad games, but I I know there's still enough talent there. Like, I don't think it's an offensive line problem like it is over in Seattle. Like, there's differences to make between where I'm cutting off and where I'm not.
That's a great point. There's guys you're saying, okay, this isn't gonna work out, and then you're saying, all right, this is a perfect opportunity to hammer AJ Green here and hammer Tyler Eifert and get upset when you lose all your money because you play Andy Dalton. That's pretty much my strategy this week, and it's gonna be ugly.
Oh, man, we're praying for Green. We need it.
Anyhow, hope you guys enjoy this. If you did or if you don't, give us a comment in the comment section down below, and certainly like and subscribe. You know, we have some good tools here. We got a nice little optimizer. That's fun, and you should check that out. I use it every week, especially to use our cafe value. I use that religiously with my lineup building, so certainly check that stuff out. And we are going to sign off here. Thanks, Jason, and we'll see you guys in week 4.